welcome to Techweek TV, brought to you by Callaghan Innovation. We're delighted to have you here with us this morning. In this session, we're going to be exploring our culture and its importance in innovation. And joining us today on this wonderful panel is Rebecca Smith, who's the director of New Zealand Story, Maru Nihoniho, who's the founder of Meteor Interactive. We have Crystal Thompson, who's the head of game development at Staples VR, and finally Jesse Armstrong, founder and CEO of Vaka Interactive. And actually for this session I'm going to hand over to Rebecca, who's going to be doing a 15-minute presentation, and then we'll be back soon for a Q&A. Over to you.
Wonderful, thank you very much, Sian. Well, this is a fantastic topic because I feel really passionately that the values that we have here in New Zealand are what drives our success. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about how we're seen as a country. So we have an excellent reputation in New Zealand around the world, and we're seen not just for our natural beauty but for a whole range of other things. So we're well recognised for a country that looks after its people and that makes endeavours to be a peaceful nation, a kind nation, and one that is open and embracing of others. We're also seen as a country that really looks after its spaces and its place and its land and its waterways, and that's really well recognised throughout the world as well. And we're also seen as a country that takes care of the planet. So we do good not just for ourselves but for the benefit of others around the world. And so all of those aspects of our reputation around the world, we tend to sum those up into what we call 3 core values or qualities. And they're summed up as kaitiaki. So there's that sense of guardianship of people, place and planet that drives our belief system and drives our success on the world stage as well. And I'll talk a little bit about how we do that. Ingenuity tends to come through very powerfully as a really core value that is recognised around the world, not ingenious in an innovation sense. So we're certainly not recognised for leading edge innovation, but we are recognised for our ingenuity in terms of turning ideas into practical reality. And that's possibly even more powerful and a key differentiator. And then we're also regarded as being a really trusted country and a trusted people who have integrity. We do what we say we're going to do. Now, none of those qualities are unique in and of themselves, but combined together is what makes New Zealand stand out on the world stage, particularly in the realm of technology and innovation and creativity. It's all of those working together that makes us who we are and what we're recognised for. And it's really important because in today's very complex and changing world, what really shifts favourability around a country and brands and individuals are perceptions of trust, freedom and morality. So more than ever, those qualities that I just described to you are actually what the world is seeking. It's what consumers are seeking, it's what business partners are looking for, it's what other countries are seeking in dealing with a partner. And so, you know, one thing I would say is that we need to really dial those values up and those qualities into our stories. And we heard this morning about storytelling and the launch of Techweek and the importance of that. We hear it as a narrative. You know, we need to tell better stories. Stories in and of their own right is one thing, but stories that encapsulate our values, and particularly that value of guardianship, of kaitiaki, of that sense of looking after others, is really important to us and a key differentiator on the world stage. So that would be my advice really for our tech sector, is to think clearly about how those values are reflected in our stories. And if you're not sure how to do that, I've got a little example that shows how we can achieve that quite easily.
That is pure and magical, and it's the most beautiful place I've ever seen my entire life.
I know this is like corny, but it literally took my breath away. I never felt that before.
There's a rainforest that links up to a glacier. How does that even happen?
Our responsibility to our land and to our future generations is really important.
We're on a mission to make better things in a better way and tread more lightly.
We care for the planet and its people, and that's what makes us different, I think.
And our gift to the world is not just our beautiful environment, but all of our talent.
New Zealand embraces and celebrates innovation, whether it be food, but also wines that stand up to the best in the world.
They created a style of Sauvignon Blanc that took the world by storm. New Zealand is a country rich with creativity, and when you combine that creativity with the power of technology, that creates things that no one could have imagined possible.
And what we can offer is limitless. Technology is our fastest growing industry.
And at Google, we love Kiwis because Kiwis have this can-do attitude. You're looking for people who are just going to make things happen.
New Zealanders have a unique way of solving problems and a lot of confidence about that. The whole America's Cup thing, you know.
The New Zealanders learned to fly on water before everybody else did. That's technology.
And we're launching rockets in New Zealand. How cool is that?
Just because we're a small island nation doesn't mean we won't give it a crack. We'll just go out and do it.
New Zealand has an incredible educational system and incredible universities.
And my education in New Zealand convinced me that I could achieve anything I wanted to do.
You're taught to question, you're taught to wonder, you're taught to puzzle, be inspired.
At my school, we've got kids from all over the world.
160 different languages are spoken in New Zealand.
Opportunities are equal to all.
Everybody's welcome in New Zealand.
And we have a collective responsibility to our land and to our future generations. And that comes from a word in Maori we call kaitiaki tanga.
Ka tino tiaki, ka tino manaki, I te tai ao, I te tangata.
But we're also good at other things, lots of other things. Look at the movies they make.
They do the best visual effects ever.
Our gift to the world is our people, who succeed wherever they go.
To be a Kiwi now is something that I'm very proud of. I'm lucky that I grew up here.
And although we're only small, we believe we can take on the world.
Belief is the most powerful characteristic you can get. And New Zealanders just simply have it as an act of nature. We simply believe that we can.
What is the most important thing in the world? He tangata, he tangata, he tangata. It is people, it is people, it is people.
So you can see, Sian, there is a really simple way for us to incorporate our values and our sense of who we are into our stories that really gets to a more emotive connection beyond the pretty pictures that we're used to showing and beyond the ones and zeros and the features and benefits. It's incorporating those really core values into our stories throughout the world, and that's what I believe will make a difference for our success in the future.
Thanks so much for your presentation. I think for me, the first time I saw that video, I cried, and it just makes me feel incredibly proud to be a New Zealander, showcasing our stories and, you know, seeing what's going on in our backyard that often we don't actually talk about because we're too busy just getting it done. And so for those of you at home, I don't know if you've figured this out yet, but basically you've got some of New Zealand's best storytellers sitting in front of you right now. So I guess, Rebecca, let's start with you. What examples can you give us of companies that have found success through weaving this into their storytelling?
Yeah, look, we see examples every day actually where businesses are expressing their value proposition not as a set of features or benefits or differentiation compared to another product, but in terms of that emotive connection. So what would be a good example? I'm going to use Rocket Lab because it's an example that many people probably appreciate or understand more. So there are 10 other countries with rocket programs, and in fact 9 other superpowers. We're probably the only superpower who has this space program. But our program isn't just about that. Our program is about making space accessible. It's about ensuring that we can manage and monitor climate change through getting satellites into space. It's building a rocket in a completely reusable manner that doesn't destroy. It's partnering with Maori to ensure that this is done in the best possible way and respectful toward the land of which those rockets are launched. And so that is a story about much more than just sending a rocket into space. That's a story about our values, our sense of people, place and planet that goes well beyond the functional benefits of having a space program here in New Zealand.
It also is a great example of going much more beyond the narrative that we have of, you know, a company going to the US and needing to have clients. It's actually, well, this is our entire culture, and then you've also got the regional element that, that the launch pad is in, one of the coolest places in New Zealand, the first place to see the sun in New Zealand, so that's quite cool. Okay, so moving on. Actually, I'd like to ask this question of all of you. Typically, New Zealand has not been very good at telling stories, or we do this thing where we tell stories inside New Zealand instead of on the global stage. So kind of interested in your perspective, maybe starting with you, Jesse. How do we tell better stories, and not just in our own bubble, but also like to the world?
Yeah, one thing that I've learned about us as Kiwis is that we're really good at believing in ourselves. but sometimes we shy away from the global stage for whatever reason, and multiple reasons. But what I've learned is that if we really are proud of our culture and what we do here and why it's unique, we shouldn't be afraid to tell that to the rest of the world. In actual fact, I read an article recently, Guy Kawasaki, who I read a lot of his material. He's awesome. Worked at Apple and founded a venture capitalist firm and has done amazing things around the world. He came and spoke recently at an event in Australia that was had a lot of New Zealanders there, and the question was posed of him as to what New Zealanders should do to get more on the global stage. And he said we should stop playing the humble card and we should just get ourselves out there. Because he said that the Kiwis do some amazing things, but some of the big players overseas actually have no idea about us. And so we really just need to not be afraid. Tell our story. Yeah.
Crystal?
I think it's a lot to do with how we tell our stories as well. I feel like New Zealand is quite an innovative place. We're usually the place where if something's very difficult, hasn't been done before, they will come to New Zealand to do it, to try it out for the first time. I think that a lot of our stories are quite impactful because of that, and it is a lot about getting the word out there. There's a lot of New Zealand first and world first in New Zealand that not everyone knows about because, again, we are too humble about that. Yeah.
No?
Yes, I agree with the humble part. When I've gone overseas and people who do know about us here in New Zealand and do know what we do, they love it. They want to see more. They're encouraged to, of me to get your story out there. What is holding you back? And I guess it's a bit of, well, how do I approach this? It's sort of the mechanics of all of it. It's like who, how, where, and even when. When is the best time to sort of launch or let people know on the global stage that there is something here that you'll really enjoy. It's been made in New Zealand, it's different, it's unique. And knowing all of that, it's about packaging it all up and moving forward. I think that is one of the personal hurdles in what I've been doing. But I think it comes through many businesses, whether it's creative tech or not. We have the idea, we have the product. It's just about how do we take it to their next step on the global stage.
Rebecca?
Yeah, look, I echo those 3 points. We see that a lot, and that's a big part of the role that we play, is to help people tell their stories on the world stage. And I think what Mario says is so valid, is that I think we all imagine that there needs to be this magical point at which we've become successful enough in order to tell our story. And I don't think any of us will ever reach that magical point. We simply have to decide that it's time to share those stories because it paves the way for others. And each of you telling your stories paves the way for other businesses and other creatives coming through the system to go, I want to be like that. That's amazing. It gives me hope. It gives me aspiration. So I think we just have to take a breath and share our stories and be really confident and comfortable with those.
Yeah, cool. Okay, Crystal, I'm going to throw this one to you. What Kiwi tech is being developed in line with this culture, and how is it performing on the world stage?
So I feel like in terms of research and development in New Zealand, there's been quite a few things that we've done quite uniquely. For example, there was the New Zealand Fire Surface application, escapemyhouse.co.nz. So that was captured in a New Zealand home with New Zealand. They wanted it to really relate to us and our stories and the type of house we have. And so we created a camera system that didn't actually exist in the world before. And it was, sort of a New Zealand R&D. We were burning down our own ovens and testing, and we were going to Bunnings warehouse to get the products and stuff like that. And that reached quite a number of people nationally and internationally. And that sort of, it showed who we are as New Zealanders, as well as solving a complex problem and getting the word out about an important and put a message.
And is this the example where the fire department gave you a house to burn down?
Yes, they did.
And so I guess
that doesn't happen all over the world. That's a very unique to New Zealand thing.
And so I guess we go back to kind of our culture and like values as a society, and being inclusive and collaborative and also curious. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that and like that collaboration and how it was made possible by all the different parties for you guys?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, First off, it would be the New Zealand Fire Service themselves, and a lot of the businesses we work with, they're very open to giving us access that you wouldn't usually have. Children's hospitals have given us access to equipment for the purpose of doing good and for the purpose of healing and the purpose of preventing something bad from happening. For virtual reality, that's really important because you want to get a realistic experience. And a lot of New Zealand businesses and companies have been very open with us, with giving us that step forward to be able to show New Zealanders in the world dangers and things that can help with what they have available to them and what's precious to them.
Awesome. Okay, Jessie, how can we actively and practically inspire more Maori and Pacific growth in tech and provide more equal opportunities?
I've been asked this question a lot, and I'm so glad that we are asking these questions. Just to give a bit of background for those viewing who may not know a little bit about our background, my co-founders and I grew up here in South Auckland. We were never exposed to the world of entrepreneurship, tech innovation. In fact, I had no idea what an entrepreneur really was until about 5-6 years ago, maybe. I'd heard the term loosely, but had no idea what they do. So when I was exposed to that world, and for me it took a trip overseas, I was able to effectively understand for myself what an entrepreneur really was, and then I knew within myself, this is what I want to be. I've come to learn that there are lots of Maori and Pacific who are the same. They just need to be exposed to the world of entrepreneurship and innovation. They need to meet people who are doing amazing things right here in their own backyard. And they need to realize that even though they may not have all the experience in the world, because we live in the age of information, you can learn essentially anything that you need to bring your creations to life. And there's that whole term of a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. Maori and Pacific, we have a growth mindset naturally, but sometimes because we're not exposed to those things, we hold ourselves back from utilizing that growth mindset. So exposure, 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 that's the key.
Awesome. Can we talk a little bit about, we're known for our culture of trying, but often our youth, that doesn't translate to them because it's really scary. And technology is scary, entrepreneurship's scary and risky, and then you also can't be what you can't see, as you just pointed out. So can you kind of share a little bit in your experiences of, how you tried and encouraging other people to try or just dip their toe in the water so that maybe they can, kind of go all in. And then it's not actually as scary as you think it is. Or it is, but do it anyway.
I'll just quickly start. So for me, I'm a bit of a weirdo in the sense though, but I don't really care what other people say. So for me, if I have an idea and I'm fixed on the idea, I just do it. But not everybody is like that. So what I would probably say to those out there who are thinking about like an idea that they have, should I try this, shouldn't I try this? I would sit down and think about, if I was to try it, what is something I could do within the comfort of my own home maybe? So then I don't have to worry about exposing myself to the world or maybe getting shamed as a result of that. And just try a controlled experiment of sorts in your own comfortable environment. And if you see success come from that, what I've learned is that success perpetuates motivation. So as you see success, or sometimes even failure can do this, then hopefully it will stir within you a desire to go to the next step and say, okay, if this worked or didn't work, what's the next kind of test that I could do? And maybe I'll try this with something different and see if that works. As we've done that, we went from being four people in South Auckland that had no idea what they were doing to now running a full-on tech company that's setting ourselves up to go global. So you just never know what can actually happen when you try.
Awesome. Crystal?
We like to be quite open with our processes and how we do things and how long it takes, and our team members. We have gone to primary schools, high schools, universities. We go to even sometimes the Armageddon Expo, something that's available to all of New Zealanders, and we show them what we did, and we will talk to them about how we made it, what kind of people we have working on them, and it's just to get people excited about it, because you know, going to a primary school, you know, I had a lot of questions that I never even heard from my team. They were quite intelligent, and we want to encourage that. We want to encourage the big questions and then answer them. Don't be afraid to answer them, so that they can sort of see, you know, this is attainable. This sort of direction is something that all New Zealanders can go towards if that's what they're passionate about, and how important it is, really.
And you can do your passions for a job.
You can, yeah. They ask me, they say, is this really what you do? It's like, yeah. Yeah, you know, it's completely attainable.
Play more games. Maybe. No?
Yes, I think when I go into schools, because sometimes you have to reach out into the community. You know, you have to go there, and just to ensure that they have an idea of what's possible. So, for example, when they see me come in and present and talk about games, they're looking at me like, do you make games, Fire? And I'm like, yes, I do. And I said to them, but do you know what? You can too.
Yeah.
I said, you can, it's within your reach. And then I'll go through with them and I'll say, you can get on this site, you can download these resources, you can experiment in your own time. It doesn't matter if you make a mistake. Mistakes are good, but you don't make them again. And, you know, it's about trying. But the problem is if these kids don't know that it's a possibility, then they won't try. So I think, people look at me like as a role model. And so I've taken that responsibility on board so I can use that to encourage not just kids, anybody. I mean, if you look at me, I didn't start a games company until I was 30. You know, so what would have helped me is that if someone had come to me when I was at school and said, did you know that you can be a game developer? And I might have got into this much earlier.
Rebecca?
I think the other aspect that really excites me about hearing that the three of you go into schools and talk to children is that it also gives those kids the opportunity to go home and say to their parents, this person was successful, they've done this, look at these examples, because there are a lot of parents who are stuck in this middle space of going, I think gaming's bad, but there's a future in digital, and should I encourage my child, or am I just increasing their bad behaviour? So I think there's a lot of unknowns for parents as well, and it makes it really difficult for particularly, I think, Maori and Pacific kids to go home and go, there's a future in this, and help parents see that there's a future in it, and a really exciting future that you can actually craft yourself.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a valid point. I think we're in a generational change time at the moment, and like the internet now, we've got our generations growing up with just that, and so you've got a bit of a knowledge gap in like how we're working, why we're working, and all of the industries and the jobs that we're doing are really fundamentally changing. And so there is that gap of, well, they didn't really exist when we were there, so people don't really know to recommend them, even though someone might have the talents and the skills and the curiosity to pursue those careers. That's definitely super important. Okay, Maru, over to you. How have you seen kaitiaki be an advantage in the tech sector?
Well, when you look at Māori values, you know, and you look at kaitiakitanga, and that's about, you know, protection or to preserve. I guess with what we're doing in storytelling, you know, and using creative tech to do that is to ensure that we do have a responsibility of care in how we tell those stories. And on the other side of that is how we work as a team together. It's very important that we look after our team members to ensure that they have a deep understanding of these values. So we just don't work with kaitiakitanga, we work with whanaungatanga. You know, we're a whānau, we're in this together. There's manaakitanga, you know, we're sharing and we're caring, because all those values will work across, I mean, they work in communities, as we know. But our team is like a small community. Our small community works with other communities. So to sort of look at the full spectrum of Māori values and to apply them to what we're doing and to apply them within our storytelling is very important, and it just puts another degree of, I guess, diversity, you know, with what we do. especially so in telling Māori stories, whether they're based on mythology or whether they're fictional. There's still the same degree of guardianship there. In fact, one of our games is called Guardian, because we're trying and we want to incorporate those values so that other people on the global stage that may be reading or interacting with Guardian Mai can sort of start to build an understanding of Māori culture through a digital platform.
Awesome, cool. For those of you watching at home, just want to remind you, and I think there's like over 100 of you and many more joining us, which don't freak out. So the email for your questions is twtv@techweek.co.nz. I'm going to start taking live questions soon, so get those in. We really want to hear from you. So, Rebecca, I'm going to go back to you. What practical advice can you give to Kiwi companies wanting to tell their own brand story?
First of all, start. Start telling your story and start telling it soon. Because I think, Mario, you've talked about some of the obstacles, and I'm sure each of you have experienced that, those hurdles in building your business. And those stories, if they come out early, will really help, because word of mouth is amazing, connections, relationships, people getting excited. I mean, I've watched, Staples VR, for example, come on this enormous curve just in the last 12 months or so, because you hear about it, you share it with others, and people start getting excited about it. So I'd say start early and don't underestimate the power of sharing your story and your reason why and the values that you hold dear to who you are and why you're doing this, because it just spreads. And I think, to pick up on your point earlier, there's that beautiful but dangerous saying, the kumara shall never speak of its own sweetness, and we have to not be the kumara. We have to really speak of our sweetness and share that with with people around us, with the rest of the world.
Those of you watching from non-New Zealand, a kumara is a sweet potato. Do any of you guys have advice for people?
Yeah.
Okay,
so,
go for it.
As a startup, one thing that I've learned, a lesson that I learned the hard way, I take it, I could say, is you have to be very careful not to be shepherded by the opinions and views of others. So, for example, we would have people looking at our business saying, oh, yeah, so from what we can see, you guys are really about this, or you're about this. And because you're a young startup and you're a little naive about things, you're just kind of like, yeah, we are about that, sure, yeah, okay, cool. Let's just tell people we're all about this then, because that mentor or that expert told us that this is what we're all about. That's not how you figure out the core of your brand story. You have to really search deep within yourself and ask yourself, at the end of the day, what are we most excited about as a company? What are we most passionate about? What impact do we want to make more than anything else? And let that shape the core of what ends up becoming your brand story. So, to give you a quick example, just recently my co-founders and I sat down and we really asked ourselves some difficult questions around, do we actually believe fully 100% that we are doing what we are passionate about? And we realized we weren't fully passionate about it because we hadn't sat down and seriously thought about it. So we had literally 8-9 hour sessions, several of them, where we unpacked core questions like, in the world of storytelling, what is it about storytelling that we actually love? And we seriously discussed those questions, and then took all of that discussion and tried to squeeze it out into a mantra, like a 3 or 4 word statement that sums up the core of what we had discussed. And for us, at the end of the day, we realized that in the world of storytelling, we are most passionate about awakening the story, finding stories that have amazing potential, understanding what is that potential, and then using the right storytelling tools or mediums to draw the full potential of that story out, to make the most impact that it can. And then as soon as we worded it that way, a complete change across the mindset that we had towards our business. Everybody's level of commitment shot up a whole new level. Our team got more excited. Creativity started flowing more. So it really does make a difference to take a step back and understand what is the core of our brand. What are we passionate about?
I really like that word, awakening, kind of, bringing it to life. And also not just for you, but in the eyes of your users or the people who go on and tell your story and sort of advocate for you because they love your product or your brand. Right. I kind of want to get back to the New Zealand, kind of on the global stage. What are some practical things? That I lived in the US for 5 years, and there used to be a joke in the US where they thought we were a state or something, like no one knew where New Zealand is, and I think that's changed a lot. But how do we go beyond Lord of the Rings or Flight of the Conchords or those sorts of stories, and how do we become more known for like our game industry or our Maori and Pacific technology, all of these things that we're actually fundamentally really good at, but just no one knows about?
Oh, I'll start with that one.
Yep.
I think we need to be cheerleaders of each other, actually, and really tell each other's stories. And often it's easier sometimes to tell somebody else's story than to tell your own. And so I think we really have a responsibility as a nation, as a people, to tell all of those stories and share them as much as possible. And particularly the I didn't know stories, the aha moments, and really shift away from some of our cliched introductions. We're no smaller than Finland or Estonia. We're no different in size to those countries. They're a long way away from other countries too. That's not our story. Our story is about being a progressive, creative nation of idea makers who can change the world and look after people, place and planet. You know, and it's getting on the front foot, I think, with that, and really being confident about who we are and what we have to offer the world, and share it. And I know that sounds really straightforward, and sharing's not always that easy, but perhaps think about sharing someone else's story if it's easier.
I think sometimes as Kiwis we can be a little bit cynical, so we tell the cynical story rather than having the courage to kind of, you know, prop someone else up, and doing it because we really want everyone to succeed and see their stories kind of flourish. It's almost like, you know, kind of having more of a growth mindset in relation to our, like, all of us, and having the kind of care to be able to do that. Do you guys have thoughts on this?
I think it comes back to what I said earlier. It's about sort of the working together, or the manaakitanga, you know, which we apply those Māori values that work in communities now to our business and to our games, but we can apply it to our industry, you know, and work with each other to help tell each other stories, because it's probably true. I could probably tell someone else's story a bit better than what I could tell mine, because I'm sort of, apart from overthinking and everything else, it's like your projects, your games, your ideas are very close to you. And sometimes it gets difficult to say, which part of this should I share, you know, or should I share the whole lot? You know, and then so that's where the overthinking bit can come into it. But at other times I'm quite happy to get on Facebook and just share a post and put it out there, and then later on I'll go back and I'll read it and I'll go, oh, edit, you know, because I didn't tell that part of the story, you know, how I wanted to at the time. So it just comes back to sort of the collaboration and working together, I think, is really important. Especially for the games industry, which is growing in New Zealand, you know, compared to 16 years ago when it was just 2 companies. There's a lot now. And a lot of that growth has been because we've worked together in various ways, you know, as an industry, to push our stories forward as much as we can. But I think if we take that to the wider tech industry, then, you know, and lift each other up and get our stories out there, this would be super, super helpful.
Yeah, I completely agree. We're small in comparison to other industries all over the world, but we do collaborate with each other in work sense. We collaborate with each other in sharing advice and sharing equipment. That's something we're really good at, but we haven't quite got to the point where sharing that globally is something that we do together. The New Zealand games industry, I feel like, is a really good community. I think that we do look out for each other, we do promote each other, and it's rather that than competitive. And I think that we could collaborate even more with the wider tech, because, you know, like I was doing a few interviews for Techweek and I heard about technology here that is outside the games industry I hadn't heard before. It blew my mind. And I was like, man, I'd really love to work with those people, even though they're completely separate, you know, robots, you know, but you can still collaborate in that way. So I think that would really help if we all sort of shared more between ourselves and then out.
Yeah, totally agree with all the points shared. One thing I've learned about business is that, especially if you're trying to help other Kiwi companies, as an example, sell for each other. So I can't tell you how many times I've been in a meeting whereas with a client and I'm talking to them and I'm understanding their needs, and then I'm sitting there thinking, I actually know a company that will do that really, really well as part of a project that we're looking at doing them, for example. So I'll sit there and I'll say, I know a company that does this and this and this. I really feel like they could fit in with the need that you have. And several times I've had these clients say to us, oh yeah, well let's get a meeting going. I'll call the people that I know from that company, let them know what's going on. They're like, oh wow, okay, yep, we'll make that all happen. And the same thing has happened with us, word of mouth. We've had organisations email saying we'd like to work with you because so-and-so had told us about what you're doing. I really feel like on the global stage we need to do a better job of that because we do that within New Zealand really, really well. In New Zealand, especially in the startup scene, everybody pretty much knows everybody, or eventually you end up knowing everybody. So on the global stage, I really feel like we should be doing this a lot more. And the second thing is, at the end of the day, what really sells is stories. So understanding the stories of other companies. For example, in the Wellington region where we're based, the startup ecosystem down there is really strong, and I've met a lot of entrepreneurs doing amazing things. And sometimes, even if I don't know if it's going to lead to any kind of business growth, I'm just curious to get to know that business. So I'll reach out to one of their co-founders and say, hey, let's go get a coffee. We'll sit down and we'll just talk. And I try to understand more about their business. So actively reaching out to do that is really helpful as well, and being able to share stories of others. Yeah.
Awesome. I'm going to throw you all a little bit of a curveball because I think you're ready for it. And so it's Mental Health Month. And I think we're talking about culture and we're talking about innovation, and we also know that, you know, the tech sector is a really interesting sector, definitely with its challenges. And so how do you think we can apply this topic personally and also to our organisations in terms of taking care of ourselves and also taking care of our teams and our wider community, so that we can all keep, you know, contributing to the greater good, but also to the kind of economic success of New Zealand?
That is a curly question, although interestingly I was just saying to Maru this morning that I hadn't realised the Spark game that you provided, which is, I mean, you can probably describe it better than I can, but it is essentially to sort of support and guide particularly children through challenges and times of worry and concern and the like. And the first thing I did this morning at the launch was I forwarded it on to my 12-year-old daughter and said, I think this is something that you and your friends should have a look at and share amongst each other and talk about. So actually just knowing what's available in this area was, you know, sparked that for me this morning, off the back of a rather uncomfortable conversation I had last night with her about some issues that her friends were facing in school. So there are some amazing support tools that I wasn't aware of, so that's just my initial example.
Do you want to follow on from that?
The Sparks game was an amazing, you know, project to work on. It's based on cognitive behavioural therapy. So it's about changing your negative thoughts to positive thoughts, you know, to sort of lift yourself up and not get so low that you just can't come back up from that. So it's essentially a set of tools that have been gamified in the gaming environment to help our kids and give them some awareness about how they think or how they can change their thinking. We made that quite a while ago now, about maybe 11 years ago.
Wow.
It's due for an update. But anyway, so, you know, the gaming platform is a powerful platform to not just tell stories, but to get some really good educational content out there. It's self-paced, so you can do it in your own time. You can do it as many times as you like, and you can do it by yourself or with your parents or caregivers and that. So, I mean, it's just highly accessible, which makes those type of applications even better. In terms of industry and mental health, you know, through industry and looking at these areas about team health and how happy are your staff and all that, of course, it's like looking after a car. If you don't look after the engine, nothing is going to happen. It'll all break down. So that's just as important as anything. And I think just being aware of it, or making people aware that there are mental health issues out there that are concerning and can be quite damaging to people, individuals in general, that it's a starting point, just to recognise that it's an issue. What we do from there on is try to encourage or nurture, you know, our people.
Yeah, I think that definitely within the games community in general, we are very good at looking out for each other. You know, at our conferences we have like safe spaces to go to. We're very supportive of that and open about being able to talk about it. We have women's and games groups, things like that. I'm always going to be a huge believer in you know, serious games and games that can help with mental health. When I was at university doing my studies about how to design for that sort of thing, like Sparks was actually one of the video games that I studied and our class looked into. I think that around that industry, there's technology and software. Games are really good at highlighting those issues and helping people through them, helping support them, and the community mirrors that in a way, I think.
Yeah, I wanted to share a point more from the team culture standpoint. So, you know, when you're a startup, especially as a co-founder, mental health becomes a very apparent issue that you yourself have to learn how to deal with. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I have just sat there and wondered, like, how am I dealing with all the stress right now because I'm just so overwhelmed with everything. What we realized within our own team is that if we can incorporate habits on a daily basis that enable us to better understand each other and practice techniques that can help us to better deal with that stress, then regardless of how stressful things get, we'll be better equipped to handle them. So as an example, I've been doing a lot of research into mindfulness lately, and it's incredible, by the way. Mindfulness is an amazing thing to learn about in general. We started practicing mindfulness techniques in our business. So every morning we would, 5 to 10 minutes, we'd sit down and we'd go to YouTube and find a free mindfulness session, and we'd go through that session together and then have a quick 5-minute discussion at the end about how we felt during that, or what type of impact we think it's going to make on our day. I can't even begin to tell you how many amazing insights have come from practicing this on a daily basis. The last point I want to quickly make around establishing a team culture that promotes positive and good mental health is empathy. Empathy is an integral part of every aspect of life. In human relationships, empathy is the key that enables us to best help and serve one another and establish healthy and happy relationships. And that same concept applies within the workplace. So I try to take time to understand not necessarily everything about my team's personal lives, but for example, if I can notice one of my team members seems a little stressed out, I'll ask questions to try and understand, is there anything that's causing this stress that I can help with? And many times it just comes down to, I just need to go eat, or I need to have a conversation with somebody about something. And so we'll take time out of our day to do that. And the warning to the business owners is avoid that voice in your head that says, but time is money. I don't know if this is going to be an effective use of time. Let's do this outside of work hours. Because at the end of the day, successful businesses are run by successful people. So if you don't have successful people running your business, the business will shoot itself in the foot.
Awesome. We're going to go live to a question from the audience, actually, and this is for you, Maru. What gave you the confidence to switch to your gaming career at 30?
It's a very good question. I had a comfortable life, working in basically hospitality industry for 14 years before I made the switch. However, it wasn't a career choice, meaning working in hospitality. I had left school rather early. I didn't engage well at school and decided that it was time to leave. And because I did that, I didn't have any qualifications. Well, I had School C. Is that how old I am? At School C. And I left and decided that I would get into the working environment. So 14 years later, working in hospitality wasn't a passion, but gaming was, because I spent more time playing Spaceys in my 4th and 5th form years than I did at school. So I guess, you know, when I look back now, I think that playing Spaceys was my Northern Star. And life experience and everything else kind of all combined, and I had the confidence to start a new business, which was Meteor. I just needed to learn, I needed to learn really fast all about the games industry. And at that time, 16 years ago, the games industry was quite different to how it is today. So I guess in the last 16 years, I've moved along with the times and kept updated with technology as it goes. But yeah, that question about, I get asked that a lot, why, how, when did that happen? It just happened. I just had decided that I wanted to make games because I like playing them, and I believed that I could use the gaming platform to tell stories in a different way, in a unique way.
Awesome. And the last thing that I just want to ask you all, if we're just looking into the future, I mean, the way of telling stories and using technology to do that has changed so much, with social media and the evolution of gaming, with the evolution of technology like VR, AR, and also with video, just like basic video as a medium, we can tell really powerful stories like the one that you shared with us earlier. So if we kind of look into the future, how do you think how we're going to be telling stories is going to change, and how powerful do you think that's going to be?
I think we should start with Jesse.
Jesse?
Digital storyteller.
Yeah. I'd say that the storytelling experience will become more real. So, for example, the world of AR and VR, you can create entirely new environments that add value to that storytelling experience. In the case of what we're doing, we're trying to build technology that bridges the gap between digital and analog, or just real life, and creating experiences that people will never forget. So I believe that technology is just going to make storytelling easier. I think that the average everyday person will have more effective tools in their kit to use to tell their own stories. And we've seen that with YouTube and vlogs and how that whole world has blown up now. And so I'm really excited for the future of storytelling tech, to be honest.
So with the upcoming capture methods, we can go from, instead of just capturing on just a still video, we can do 360 degrees. We can capture with point cloud data. So we can capture places all over New Zealand, all over the world, and show people that. And at the moment, the capture systems are there, but the showing people, the technology hasn't quite progressed there where it's easily accessible to everyone. So in the future, we're going to be able to show people in high detail, very close up, things that have existed in the past, in the history, things that they'll never get to see, they can't physically go to, it's too dangerous to go to. That's going to be very important for storytelling, because we're going to be able to tell stories of our past more effectively by physically bringing people there more effectively. That's going to get better and better every year, and it's progressing very fast at the moment.
And I think it's, so the gaming platform, we use it to tell stories, and I think in the future though, it's going to be beyond just telling the story, it's going to be experiencing the story, it's going to be feeling like you're right there, it's, I mean, you can do that now with AR, VR and that, but it's going to be such an immersive experience, and something that's so different. In my mind, I'm trying to think, what is that going to look like, and it may not even come from my mind, of course, it may come from someone who's at primary school right now. But the point is that if they aren't aware of what we're all doing in our businesses right now in this industry, then they may not ever create that experience. So it's about letting these kids know, letting our rangatahi know that this is for you, you can do this, and seeing what comes out of their mind, seeing what stories or in the future, I guess, what unique experiences they'll deliver.
Like last?
Yeah, I'll reinforce that as well. And with a little example, I was explaining an artificial intelligence test to my 12-year-old, who is my test body at home. And she patiently listened to me, and she said, "Oh, you adults just make things so complicated. Really, you should just ask us kids, because that's the way we think. You don't need to, manage that process. That's just the way we think." So my sense is that the future is extraordinarily exciting for these young kids who are coming through, who've got all these tools at their disposal, who are going to be growing up in this completely immersive environment. I think the call is to engage them now, I don't think we need to wait for these kids to get to, university or discover their passion when they're 30. I think the opportunities to help them unlock those ideas and the creativity now, because they look at us and think we're way beyond that, Yeah. It's exciting.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was really great to have you here. And those of you at home, thanks so much for tuning in and have a good day. See you later.